Ty, thanks for coming on the show, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, for sure. So the topic is business credit, and my guess is, correct me if I'm wrong, but has that become a hotter topic since PPP and since everything that we've seen lately?
I don't know. I think that whenever the economy shifts, we obviously had a lot of growth during COVID because everybody's looking for the easiest ways to get money. And what was interesting is in corporate credit, business credit that's built to your EIN, not linked to your social, we saw no drop off whatsoever with cards being issued. But we did on the other side, where you do have a personal guarantee, it's based on consumer credit. Chase, Bank of America, those guys really tightened up. So corporate credit, yeah, we did a lot during COVID because that was something people could get. And revenue lending, which is the most popular form of business financing, that was all based on you having consistent revenue. Well, that whole industry crashed because all of a sudden nobody had consistent revenue. So like that product, which is the most popular, and business credit cards kind of halted. So we saw a lot of influx in the other areas where people still could get capital.
Yeah. And to take a step back, and especially for people that don't know a lot, including myself, how would you define business credit versus personal versus these other types of credits?
Well, if you really look, sometimes I get into the definition of corporate and business credit, but business credit really is credit you can get for your business EIN that's not linked to your personal social. But there's really two different ways you can go there. There's business credit by real definition, which is you can go to Chase, you can go to the Bank of America and get a credit card. You can supply your own personal credit to qualify. You can supply a personal guarantee. By definition, those are really business credit cards. Corporate credit cards are where you're really getting them for the business, which means that the business is funding itself. The business is qualifying for the credit cards. Your personal credit's not even looked at. It's not even needed. There's no personal guarantee. There's no personal liability. Your business is basically building your credit profile and score and then using that to qualify for all kinds of really high limit credit accounts. So usually when I talk about business credit, it's that kind of credit where it doesn't need a personal guarantee, doesn't need a personal credit check. Anybody can get it. It's not based on cash flow or collateral or credit or any of those things that loans and credit lines are based on.
Right. And the word business credit card sounds like it's kind of window dressing a lot of the time. And really it's personally guaranteed and that sort of thing.
You just have to be careful. A lot of people go and think they get business credit cards. So let me give you a Capital One Spark card as an example. They're a very popular credit card. But a lot of people don't know about, Capital One Spark because it reports on your consumer credit report and your business credit report. And the problem with that is that, our consumer credit reports and scores were never designed for us to be able to fund a business. So, one of the big problems, there's 30% of your consumer FICO scores based on what's called utilization, what percentage of your credit limit you're using. Well, man, you know how it is as business owners. I could put $100,000, $200,000 on my business credit card this month, but then I pay it off. So if I hit in the wrong cycle and that hits my credit report and shows that my balance is that high, man, it can be devastating to your consumer FICO scores. So if you're getting a business credit card, the important thing to always know is where is it reporting? I never get a credit card without asking them that question. If I get a PNC Bank application, I call them and say, where is this credit card actually going to report to? And there's two types of people that are going to answer that phone. Somebody that knows and somebody that doesn't. Somebody that doesn't is always like, anything other than a straight answer. And then the one that knows goes, oh, it's going to report here. And this is who we look at to pull. So you want to know that. And you want to stay away from business credit cards that report on your consumer credit reports. As long as they don't report anywhere or report in your commercial credit reports, you're good, whether you give a personal guarantee or not. But you just want to stay away from the stuff that reports in your consumer credit reports. And you won't know that unless you ask.
Right. And I think connected to that, and I think that a lot of the conventional wisdom that you hear, especially in the small business world, when I've talked to people that have gotten loans, is like, it's sort of like brick wall, you have to personally guarantee in order to get the loan. And then that, I think, creates a whole other universe of stress for business owners, knowing that they're personally on the line for these things. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Like, what is there another way to think about this? Is that not necessarily the case?
So when we look at personal guarantees and we look at the definition of personal guarantees, the definition of personal guarantee is it's basically required because a business can't stand on its own. So what happens is the business owner has to come in and kind of vouch for the business because the business isn't strong enough to stand on its own. But we also know, that Michael Dell isn't guaranteeing credit lines that Dell is getting. So like as business owners, there's this lag. We understand that it's possible because we see all these high-level CEOs and owners of publicly and privately owned companies that get, these companies get credit lines and loans and the owner's not guaranteeing them. and then we know that we struggle to do so. Well, in between that gap is business credit. The reason that Dell, the reason that Walmart, the reason any of these companies can get credit in the business name is because if you pull their credit report, you see 100, 200 trade lines on their business credit reports. They have $1 million credit lines on there. So that's what you've got to do is you've got to consciously build a credit report and score for your business. Then you can go into Amazon and say, Amazon, I want a $50,000 credit card for my business to spend with you, but I don't want to be a guarantor. I don't want to be a signer. And then Amazon says, okay, well, that would mean your business needs to qualify on its own. And you say, my business can qualify on its own. And then Amazon pulls your corporate credit profile with Dun & Bradstreet, Experian, or Equifax Business, with the biggest players in the reporting agencies in the commercial space. And then they see that you have 10 trade lines, 10 accounts on your business credit reports. They see that you've got a good score, that you're paying those accounts as agreed, that you're using those accounts. And then what Amazon's computers do is automatically approve you because they see your credit reports the same as consumer credit, right? They see you have a good credit report. They see you have a good score. They see you pay everybody's agreed. And then they approve that without you being needed. So the more you build this business credit profile, the more kinds of credit and financing become available without that personal guarantee. So these big companies have hundreds of trade lines. That's how they can get loans and credit lines. But even the small guy in 3, 4, 5, 6 months can get 10, 20, 30, 40, $50,000 individual limit credit cards at almost every major retailer, Visa, MasterCard, auto financing, computer leases, all without personal guarantees and credit checks. And then even more funding down the road as they continue to build that profile and score.
Right. That makes sense. So I guess with that in mind, how do you get started? What's the healthy way to kind of start building that profile if you haven't thought about it yet?
Well, the very first thing to do before you get any kind of money is what I call fundability. And you kind of look at it like this. You've applied for a credit card before and you've got two outcomes. You either got that immediate automatic approval that said, hey, congratulations, you're approved. Sometimes it tells you your limits here are $10,000. Or you get that dreaded message that, you'll hear by mail it's 7 to 10 days, which I don't know about you, Dan, but that's never been a good letter that they send me, right? It's always, I'm denied, and here's why I'm denied, and here's the bureau they pulled. So what the goal is we want automated approvals. So we have to understand that these decisions are made by computers, and we have to ask, what are these computers looking at to determine approval and denial? And a lot of us are wrong there. We think it's our income. We think it's our credit score. We think it's all these things that it's not. It's very basic stuff. The vast majority of loans that are denied and credit cards that are denied is because the credit issuer or lender, they think it's fraud. Think about how much fraud we're exposed to. Imagine being a bank. I mean, the vast majority of applications banks process aren't even legit. More than half of them, they're all fraud. So these computers are looking for fraud. And so what the first thing they're doing is they're looking for all these discrepancies in information. They're getting your information from all these sources on the back end. And they're saying, okay, here's the stuff you put on your application. Does it match here? And when it doesn't match, it automatically gets denied. So you've got to make sure that, first of all of your information is congruent online. Your business name, your business address, your business phone number. A lot of us set our business up with the Secretary of State, and we don't even think about it after that. Then we change our address, and we change our business name. Then we change our website, our phone number, our email, and we don't update that. So we've got to make sure our Secretary of State, our social media pages, our website, our bank statements, yellow page listings, it all has the same information. We want to have a business address. We never want to use a home address. We don't want to use a PO box or UPS address. So a real business location or a virtual address, which you can rent and get if you don't need a physical location. You want to have a business phone number. Don't use a mobile phone. Don't use a home phone on an application as your business phone number. List that phone number with 411. Make sure it's a toll-free phone number. If you need a license for your business, get it. There are vendors like Granger that will give you a $2,500 credit line just because you actually have a license for your business. Set up a professional website, set up a professional email. Don't use Gmail addresses as your business address on an application for credit. The easiest way to explain it is just think about every single line item on an application you're completing and make sure that the answer you're putting there makes you look legitimate and credible. That's the very first step. Now, once you've done that, then you can immediately start getting credit that reports to the business credit reporting agencies. And this is issued through trade vendors. And trade vendors are places like Uline, Quill, Granger. They sell products and services that we want and need. We use them all the time. Crown Office Supplies. They sell, Quill's 1 million plus, products that they sell. So it's the stuff that we want and need. But these guys will give us credit to buy that stuff. Now, they want us to pay them back in 30 days or 55 days or 15 days. It's a net 15 or net 30 or net 55 term, but they give us credit even as a startup business, even with no business credit established. And when we get credit with them, we use it, we buy stuff, then we pay that bill. They report those bills to the business credit reporting agencies. Now you got to be careful because 97% of trade vendors don't report the credit. Places like Uline, Quill, and Granger do. And then once we do this, once we buy stuff and then they ship it and then we pay the bill, that reports on our business credit reports. That gives us initial credit reports. That gives us initial credit scores. And then with that foundation, we can then get into some other steps we can discuss, which is to get all these other tiers of credit that we really want to get once we built that initial foundation.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess one thing I'd love to learn more about is just this world of trade vendors. So what makes them a trade vendor? How many are there? Why are there? It sounds like not that many companies that are reporting to these to Equifax and so on. Like, what can you talk about that world a little bit?
Sure. There are tens of thousands of trade vendors because all trade vendors are businesses that sell products and services that extend you credit as a small business owner, right? Think about it. I'm from a small town in Indiana, 9,000 person population. We've got a big lumber store in that town, right? And if I live in that town and I go in there, they'll easily give me a credit account for, let's say, $3,000 to buy lumber in that store for my business. That happens all over the country, right? In every one of our towns, small or big, there are probably hundreds of places that will sell you their stuff and give you credit on terms. If you think about it, that's where credit started. So when we look at consumer credit with TransUnion, Equifax, Experian, it started in the grocery store business. So grocery store when they very first started this, they started extending terms. And then other people said they started keeping information on how their customers pay and they extended them terms. And then other people said, hey, that's a great idea. We want to buy that information from you. And then we want to extend credit to those people. So that's how it initially started. So business credit is basically, that's how vendors work, it's these local companies that sell products and services that we want and need. They give us credit to buy them. But it's not easy to report credit to the business credit reporting agencies because even though they get data and sell it, that's fundamentally what they do. They don't even want to bother with you if you don't have a lot of data to give them. So if you're a small business owner, that lumber company in my hometown, they don't have enough records that Dun & Bradstreet wants to deal with them. They don't need somebody that's going to send 5 or 10 customers payments into them. So they have requirements. And Bank of America might require that you have 500 people to 2,500 people that are paying you monthly that report. So as a result of that requirement, most trade vendors don't report to credit. They don't have enough people paying them for the bureaus to even accept those payment histories. So that's why about 97% of trade vendors, they don't report the credit they give you. And it's also why a lot of us think we have business credit established because people are giving us credit only to be surprised or shocked and realize we don't because those people aren't reporting that credit. So there's this very small universe of vendors that actually report. They're the ones you've got to tap into to build that initial credit profile and score.
Yeah, and I don't want to get too stuck on a tangent, but I'm just super interested about those few thousand that actually report. So, like, what's their incentive to actually report? Like, what are they getting out of it? Why is it why is that number so small? I'm just curious about it.
Well, first, from what I know, it's not 1,000. I think you're talking about less than probably 100 that we even know of in the country that really do have that ability, and we have a whole data team that just tracks these guys down. And the reason they would do it is because it gives their customers, it's a better possibility that your customers are going to pay you as agreed, and that's why I think about it. If you get a credit card and that, you go late and it doesn't show up on your credit report, man, that's the first one that you're going to go late on over the ones that do report. So, even we're the same way. We know our customers are going to be more inclined to pay us when we report their payments to the business credit reporting agency. So that's what we do. And we tell them that. And if they go late, the first thing we do is notify them and say, hey, like, you're going to go late. This is going to adversely affect you. It's not our decision. Equifax requires we give them all of the information, whether it's good or bad. So you got to pay this. So it's an incentive to get your customers to pay you on time. And it's an incentive if they're late to get them to pay up because, there's a serious repercussion by not paying that bill. So there's a lot of reasons that people extend credit and report it. But that's one of the biggest is that, you have a better probability that customer is going to pay you on time.
Yeah, the incentives make sense, and I want to get to something else soon, so I don't mean to get stuck on this, but it's like, why is it that hard for other companies to do that? Is that the reason there's just hundreds or so companies that are directly
Well,
reporting, or like
there's two
what's?
main reasons. I
Yeah.
think the first one I've already mentioned. You have to
Mhm.
have a high volume of records to even be able to report to DMB Equifax Experian. If you come in and you say, I have 10 coaching clients, Experian, Equifax, DMB, I want to report to you, they're not going to work with you. They want hundreds, if not thousands, of data points that you're giving them. So most small businesses, they just don't have enough volume of customers to even have enough records to send to the bureaus. The bureaus won't work with them because they don't have a high enough volume. The other thing is, it's not an easy process. Like, we're in the credit space. We understand algorithms. We would understand the bureaus, commercial and consumer, more than 99% of people out there. And it's still a 3 to 6 month process we're going through right now with Equifax to get the ability to report. So it's a very difficult, very time consuming process to even get the ability to report to these guys. And you have to have a high volume of records to do it. So bottom line is, the barrier of entry is really high. And the barrier of entry being so high is why most vendors don't even do it. Plus, keep in mind, 90% of entrepreneurs don't even know anything about business credit. So then you compound that. These people issuing credit, they don't even know about the business credit reporting agencies. They don't even know that they can report customers' payments. So there's just that ignorance where a lot of people don't even know it's possible. Then there's that high barrier of entrance once you do know, to even get the ability to report.
Right, right, makes sense, and that seems like a lot of hoops to jump through. So, to take a step back a little bit, I'd love to hear your thoughts on a healthy way to approach debt. Like, there's lots of different opinions, lots of different conventional wisdom. There's some people that say you should take on debt just as a holdover. There's others that are bigger believers in debt, like the tech startup world and so on. I guess I'd love to hear like how you think about it, and how and if you think that calculus changes when you're thinking about debt on a business level versus if you had to personally guarantee it in your business.
Well, we call this OPM, right? Other people's money. And the reality is that there is none of the largest publicly or privately owned companies in this country don't borrow money. All of them do. And there's a reason Apple is sitting on literally billions of dollars in cash, but they still actively borrow a lot of money. And that's because these guys have got where they are because they've mastered OPM. So let's use Walmart as an example. Walmart's the biggest retailer in the world. And what most people don't realize is that 80% of what Walmart sells, they actually buy on credit. So think about their model. What they ultimately do is they have Bounty paper towels on the shelf. They don't go pay Bounty cash to buy those paper towels and put them on the shelves. They actually use business credit. They go to Bounty, they use their business credit to buy those paper towels. They put them on the shelf. They have the best inventory management system in the world. I don't know why their shelves are always empty with that, but they theoretically do. So then those tell them when they're low on inventory, they go buy more. You come in, you buy the paper towels, they take your money, they give it to Bounty to pay off the credit. They've mastered OPM. It's why they are the biggest retailer in the world. And what's interesting is that Walmart has more and spends more in business credit than they do in all shareholder value in the company. I mean, that's how big business credit is to them. So we see these companies get as big as they are because they're mastering OPM. And we've never seen a company that becomes one of the biggest privately or publicly owned companies that gets there without borrowing money. That's essential to get there. It's the mastery of using debt to get there. So that's what I see in the business world. I get the Dave Ramsey, philosophy. And I think in the consumer world, that's good. Credit cards in the consumer world, I try to avoid at all cost. But in the business world, if I can leverage somebody else's money to be able to grow faster or to be able to grow, better or easier, then it makes sense to do so if growth is the ultimate goal. So I think it depends on your goal. But I think if you're really planning on growing, you never see any of the biggest companies out there grow and not use OPM to get it. Everybody's using OPM. That's how they got as big as they are.
Yeah, yeah, and that makes sense. I'd love to get into some tangible examples because I guess a Walmart. I think that a lot of people's objections might be, okay, that's Walmart, right? I'm a small business. I'm dipping into credit for the first time, getting levered up for the first time. What are some of those examples like with your clients where people will come to you and say, "Hey, I want to get some business credit so I can do X," and maybe one of those situations you're like, "Oh yeah, that makes sense," and maybe there's others where you're like, "That sounds like a really stupid idea." Are there any examples of that sort of situation you can
So
talk
we have
about?
a client that, had a tow truck business. She had one tow truck on the road. She came in, she wanted $80,000. Credit was bad, everything that prevents her from getting a loan. We ended up getting her $8,000, not 80 for her initial loan. She bought a second truck. She put a truck on the road. She doubled her revenue, right? Because she got the truck. Now, she would not in her business have generated enough profit to spend $8,000 on another truck for 5 years or so, right? So now you look at the situation where she just took 5 or 10 years worth of saving all of her profits to get a truck. She borrowed somebody else's money and got it immediately and doubled her revenue in a very short period of time. So less than 6 months later, we see the doubling of revenue. Now she comes in and gets 30 grand. Then she goes back out and buys 3 more trucks. So this cycle continues. And in the course of, a year, by the end of the year, she got that $80,000 loan. She literally had built within 2 years a fleet of tow trucks. And, now she's looking at a 10x increase in her revenues for her business. This would have taken her every bit of 20 years or 15 years to save the money to do it. But by coming in and leveraging somebody else's money, she's able to grab these chunks, be able to, double her revenue, prove that she's done it, then get more, then get more, then get more and do it. We had another client that came in and he was closing his office. He had $417,000 in tax lien to the IRS. Credit was bad. Bank turned him down, didn't think he could get money. And, in the course of a little over a year, we got him $1.5 million. The guy not only paid off the tax lien, but then he was an OB/GYN doc, opened up a second practice. So he doubled his practice size. He even ended up running for Senate. And this was a guy that's on the verge of bankruptcy, about ready to close his doors for the IRS. So those are examples. Another, one of my really good friends owns a martial arts studio. In a year and a half, their goal was to open up a second one. Well, we got them, corporate credit. They used that money to actually be able to come in and they got their second business off the ground and third one. So in a year and a half, they planned on opening one. And in a year, they opened 2 other locations, tripling the amount of revenue in their overall business. Then COVID hit. And, martial arts studios, not essential, not a good place to be in COVID because it's all high contact.
Yeah,
and they were able to take that, corporate credit, carry them through and then open and create an online program. So just some examples of where people are using this kind of credit to expand their business, whereas that kind of growth would have taken decades if they didn't have access to it.
Right. And I think understandably, it sounds like the through line is that people are investing in things they know and understand really well, and essentially doubling down as opposed to speculative things that they have a hunch about. Right.
Well, and that's it. I mean, look, part of all business is speculative. And the very first loan we ever took out was for $75,000. It was a cash advance loan. It was like 8% interest. Our term was like 2 or 3 years. Our payment was $9,000 a month. And we came in and we said, we're going to get an office. We have these people that want to send us all these leads. And we're going to we had like 3 things we wanted to do with the money. One of them worked. The other 2 didn't, and so it was some time for us to recover from that, because the reality is what we wanted to use the money on was somewhat speculative. We made our best educated guess, and it didn't work out. It's what we do as entrepreneurs, right? I mean, it's just the way that it is. So sometimes those bets pay off and sometimes those bets don't pay off. The second loan we got was a $325,000 SBA loan. Again, we leveraged it to take some risks. Some of those risks paid off and a lot of the risks didn't pay off. So I think that that's the way it in business. I don't think sometimes you just don't have a guaranteed thing you're going to do the money on. But then again, we had a client that, he owns a soft drink company and he outsources the bottling of the soft drinks. But by, using corporate credit, by getting the money he needs to bring that soft drink manufacturing in house, his margins shot through the roof and he was immediately exceedingly more profitable. So sometimes you're banking it on things are going to work. You have a Facebook campaign. It works. All's good. And then you want the money to scale it. But anybody that's scaled a Facebook campaign knows it's not that easy. You start to scale and spend more, your results plummet. So you see what I'm saying? I mean, sometimes you don't have a guarantee on the other end. You take your best educated guess, use the money as wisely as you can, try to diversify into several things potentially. Some things work, some things don't.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think to bring this home to our audience, we're working with agents, ad agencies. It's a service business. I think a lot of the times they've sort of built the business haphazardly, and they're getting business sporadically through referrals. Office space isn't as big of a need, obviously, now as it once was, and I think what creates a lot of hand wringing is that sort of in that context the idea of spending money to make money, right? I put in $1 and five come out into this machine. So I just love to hear your thoughts on that. Do you have any clients that are harder cases where it's less tangible? It's not like, okay, I'm going to buy another truck and I'm going to expand my business by 5x, where it's kind of harder. We have to kind of feel around a little bit more. I guess in that context, is there the right way to start thinking about getting levered up?
Well, I think in service businesses, it depends on your advertising model, but it's all advertising. I mean, what's nice about digital marketing companies, for example, is they specialize in digital marketing, right? I mean, that's where a lot of our leads come from. So these companies understand the idea that you test a Facebook campaign and we understand what home runs are and we understand what they're not. And, really scaling ad spend in that world comes down to being able to come in and be able to get a positive ROI. If I'm able to spend like we spend here, if I'm able to come in and spend $1,000 to get a customer that's worth $2,500 to me, and I've spent $1 million and still see that statistic, then why the heck would I not spend 5 times more money, managing it wisely as I scale ad spend to get there? So I think that in a lot of service businesses is more popular. It's not a tow truck. It's not another office. It just comes down to scaling whatever you're doing marketing wise that's working. You're putting more money into direct mail because you're killing it in direct mail. You're putting more money into Facebook ads, more money into Google, more money into YouTube. So that's what we see with a lot of service businesses, is that they're actually coming out and they're getting the money they need to scale whatever they're doing to get customers, whether it be influencers, whether it be, affiliate marketing. They're using that money to scale what they already know works. And that's the responsible way to do it. And that's the way we're doing it right now. So, we're going from about a $12 million top line last year to looking at, closer to 18 next year. Well, it's not hard. We just have to scale ad spend. And as long as we scale ad spend responsibly and still get our return on the back end, then we can, grow 50% in the course of a year. So that's where we see it a lot more popular in the service-based business.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And I guess with that, in terms of not so much what companies should be doing, I'm sure it's very situational, but in terms of the trends you're seeing, would you say that you're seeing more leverage going towards things like ad spend and marketing as opposed to hires, as opposed to bringing on new employees and that sort of thing these days?
When we look at where people spend money, and we do a lot of statistics on this, for us, typically it's expansion, it's marketing, and it's the hiring of new employees and equipment. Those are the most common things that people are actually using money for. Is those things. But, a large part of it, is on the marketing. It's on the actual growth. It's on the getting the employees and building the infrastructure to actually be able to scale that organization. That's where it almost always is. It's on the marketing aspects that make it grow, and then the building of the systems and the infrastructure with employees and technology that you need to support that growth.
Right. And to kind of bring up, the common topic these days about office space and, where people are working, how they're working. I'd love to just hear your thoughts on that. It seems like, that to me, it seems like a lot of that's not bouncing back because it's just this amazing amount of overhead that's been removed for all these companies that thought they couldn't do without it. But maybe I'm wrong about that. I'd love to hear your perspective on the space topic.
Well, I definitely think, and to go back to your prior point, one other thing I want to bring in is buying businesses. That's something we're seeing a lot of people do right now. And I actually have worked with several different digital agencies that are getting money for acquisition because it is perfect time for that, right? I mean, a lot of people are struggling right now, and there's trillions of dollars in businesses that are available for sale. So that's one more thing we're seeing people invest a lot of money into, is that instead of them growing everything organically, they're buying the SEO company. They're buying the assets that they need to be able to grow faster. They're even buying YouTube channels. They're buying Facebook groups. They're buying these assets instead of creating themselves from scratch. When it comes to the real estate space, we're virtual. We're 100% virtual. And we weren't that way. We had 2 offices in COVID. We closed both of them down because we saw a vulnerability that we didn't recognize before COVID, which is, one sales guy gets sick in our sales office, they're all sick. And then you've got a serious problem. So it really recognized a threat that we didn't see before. And we immediately shut down that threat because we already had experience going virtual. But I think you've got a couple things happening. I think obviously now a lot of people are recognizing that, wow, we can do a lot of things virtually we didn't know we can do. There's a benefit between being able to hire somebody nationwide for this position and only being able to hire somebody within 10-mile radius of the actual location. There is a liability you have by having everybody in one office. Employees are typically happier. And if you have the right employees, they typically have higher production if they're actually working from home. Your retention of those employees are, I think that a lot of people are starting to see those realities that we recognize from inception because 70% of our staff was always virtual. And so doing so, you're seeing a lot of abandonment of commercial space. Now, that being said, you and I both know there's still a lot of businesses that will never be able to get out of having commercial space. They need that space. And so it's created this opportunity to be able to come in and grab commercial space right now really cheap. And we're seeing a lot of people come in and buy buildings that they were renting or leasing, and they've already have tenants in those other spaces in that building. And all of a sudden they had a $10,000 expense in rent. And now they're in a facility that has $16,000 a month in rent coming in. And, they got a $10,000 mortgage, and now they're profitable. They went from it costing them 10 grand to making 6 because now they can cover the mortgage payment, with the actual rent and still be profitable. And we're able to see a lot of people do that without limited to no money down, or the money they need down, they're getting from other financing to get it. So we're starting to see that from both sides. We see a lot of people abandoning commercial space, really tightening up margins and becoming ridiculously profitable because they don't need offices and all the expenses that go with it. And we see other people that need to be in offices that are buying this commercial space up right now really cheap. Landlords are scared. They're getting little to no money down. And then they're actually lowering their overall expenses because of rent rolls that they're getting with other people and other tenants in that location. So we're seeing a lot of both.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And I know predictions are hard, but where do you see it going, post-COVID, especially with companies that don't have to be in a space that can be virtual? Do you see it bouncing back? Do you see it doing something in the middle?
I think that we have a new normal. I will never go back to where we were because, this has changed a lot of people's perspective on everything. It's opened up a lot of blue oceans for a lot of industries and blown the ceiling off what I think a lot of them can do. But when we look at this historically, I've spent 20 years in financial services. I've owned a mortgage company. I owned a mortgage company during the mortgage crash. What we typically see is that we're going to see a tremendous amount of foreclosures into next year. The guys that I know in that space that that buy distressed debts, they buy distressed mortgages. The statistics on that it's absurd. The amount of foreclosures that we're going to potentially be looking at will dwarf what we've seen in 2008 from the people that I know that are in that distressed space. If that is the case, then typically commercial happens a year after. So commercial is about 12 to 18 months after that, we'll see the impact. So I think that, in 2022, you're going to start to see commercial real estate really take a huge drop in value. A lot of it's going to become available, and it's really going to be a great opportunity for people to get in there and buy. I think that a lot of companies have permanently changed their perspective. And I think that they've realized that they don't need space when they once thought they did. And, you see examples now in stories of companies paying 10 million plus just to get out of their leases. And they're now getting out of those facilities. So I think it's one and the same. I think you have a lot of people abandoning commercial space. And then I think that so many other industries now have a blue ocean and they're seeing opportunities, and they're now coming in and occupying that space with new ventures and new things that are products and services we didn't see pre-COVID. So it'll be interesting. I think commercial real estate is going to be available for sale pretty cheap in the years to come. And I also think that you have a permanent shift in perspective where a lot of companies are now going to have more employees, if not all their employees, working from home because they've now seen the benefit, including sometimes increased production.
Yeah, it's fascinating. We'll have to see how it plays out, but it sounds like a pretty, astute perspective on it. So I appreciate it. And Ty, I guess with that, there's so much that we've covered. And one thing that I'm kind of selfishly curious about are those trade vendors, that list. Do you have resources you put out? Is there somewhere people can go to learn about the stuff? Yeah.
If they go to creditsuite.com/EIN guide, that's creditsuite.com/EIN guide. That maps out the steps in depth of building business credit. Because today we talked about getting trade vendors. But, when you have 5 of those, that's when you can start to get Staples and Amazon and Walmart and, almost every major retailer, even Nordstrom and Macy's offer that credit without the personal guarantee and credit check. So the key is to get 5 of those vendors. Then when you have 14 accounts reported, you can get the Visa cards, the MasterCards, the auto financing. So it's just a continuance of that process that we talked about. That guide at creditsuite.com/EIN guide gives a bunch of vendors and a lot more detail in the exact steps to be able to build business credit.
Right. It makes a lot of sense. And beyond that, how can people get in touch with you? So what's the best way?
Creditsuite.com. They visit us online at creditsuite.com. They can grab a free guide there that will help with building business credit. Our phone number, our social media channels are at the top right of our page. We go live on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and Periscope. And we do that Tuesday, Thursday at 1, 11 o'clock on Wednesday, all Eastern. So we have a lot of live training. We have hundreds of videos on YouTube that map out fundability, building business credit, hundreds of different ways that business owners can get financing that we didn't have time to dive into today. It's all on our social channels at the top right of our page, creditsuite.com.
Awesome. Good for you for putting out that much content. I know how much energy it takes, and we're not even on that schedule. So kudos.
Thanks. I appreciate it. We're big in the education space.
For sure. Very good. Ty, thanks so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It was a blast.